Good evening. Call to order the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 28th, 2018. If we could have the roll call, please.
Atkins.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Giarusso.
Here.
Hartley.
Here.
Holst. Leeper.
Here.
Oberly.
Here.
Saul.
Here.
Wingert.
Here.
Thank you. Next is our approval of minutes from our November 14th commission meeting. If there are no corrections or comments in those meeting minutes, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? All those in favor of approval of our November 14th minutes signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you. Our minutes are approved. At this point, we will open the floor to any public comments. And seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item is a public hearing. This item is for rezoning from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Residential District. The notice for this public hearing was published in the Courier on November 18th. I need a motion to receive and file that public notice. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Thank you. At this point, we'll declare the public hearing open on this item and ask staff to provide our background information.
I'll be abstaining on this topic.
Thank you.
Noted, Mr. Wigert would be abstaining on this particular item.
So, excuse me, Panther Farms LLC has submitted a request to rezone about 40 acres of land from A1 agricultural to R1 low-density residential. The area consists of two different parcels indicated here on the map, which are located directly north of the new Aldrich Elementary School site. Rezoning this land would allow for the development of single-family homes similar to the neighboring subdivisions of the Prairie West and Winds developments. So any rezoning requires careful consideration and an evaluation of the existing land as well as the characteristics of the areas around the site in question. Here you have the rezoning exhibit that was submitted, as well as an excerpt from our future land use map. The property is surrounded by residential zoning, and the request is consistent in character with that area. When considering rezoning, there really are 4 criteria that staff use to review the request, and I'll walk you through each of those, and then more details can be found in the staff report in those areas. So the first is consistency with the city's future land use map, which in summary is the approved visual a community has created to guide development within the city. So the City of Cedar Falls adopted ours in 2012. As you can see, again, the image on the right, the area that is outlined in red is majority yellow, which is low-density residential, and green for greenway. So the R1 zoning that is requested is consistent with that yellow area of low-density residential. So what is being requested is consistent with our future land use map. The second criteria that we look at is floodplain, or more specifically, if there's any environmental sensitive areas that need to be considered or protected. So from what staff and the applicant are aware of, there are none. This area has been farmland for a long time, but it does border the floodplain, which is that blue segment on that map of the future land use map. But again, no concerns in that area. In terms of the third criteria, we look at municipal services. If the site has access to needed services such as sewer and water, and then the site does have access, and that would be primarily through the neighboring subdivisions with the school to the south, and then Prairie West 7th, I believe, there to the east. Future connection would also be available there to the north as future development occurs. The last area that is considered is access, so whether or not the site can be accessed to be developed. So looking at the site, there are adequate connections to allow for future development at this location, mainly with Arbors Drive coming from the south, again through the school's property, and then with the intent of that going north and connecting to Green Hill Road to the north there. There's also connection to the east from Richard Road to this site. So there is adequate access for development on this land. So in summary, rezoning this property would allow for the continued development of residential lots in this area, and the request does satisfy city code requirements and is appropriate for this location. So city staff does recommend approval of this rezoning request.
Thank you. At this point, we'll go ahead and open it up if there's anyone who'd like to comment on this item. Bring it back to the commission for a discussion.
Looks pretty, yeah, same thing.
Without any further discussion, this item will continue on to, the public hearing will continue on to our December 12th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
If the commission desires, you can also approve it at today's meeting and forward it to city council as well if you feel that no further review or comment is needed.
Discussion on that?
I guess
Options
the
tonight, or-
only thing we don't really see here is the preliminary plat for, the streets and connections to Green Hill and all that. That kind of rounds out the rest of the that piece of property is the ultimate connections with Green Hill, which we've talked about in the past, and obviously to the school down to the south. So I guess this really needs to happen. So I would say that, yeah, it should move on. Are we going to see any of at the next meeting? Would there be any preliminary layouts, or do we just go for the rezoning?
So preliminary layouts aren't required for rezoning, but the applicant is looking to move forward here. So maybe in the next couple meetings or so, we should
Okay.
see a preliminary and final plat potentially come through.
Sounds
So
good.
I would move that we approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. And we need to do a verbal. Staff, would you want to do a roll call, or how would you like us to proceed?
Yeah, why don't I
with
do a roll call?
our voting mechanism?
Atkins? Aye. Hartley?
Aye.
Girousso?
Aye.
Oberly?
Aye.
Leeper?
Aye.
Saul?
Aye.
Arnson?
Aye.
And one abstention. Okay, so that item is approved and will move on to City Council. Public hearing is therefore closed on that item also. We'll move on to new business items in our agenda, the first of which is a Central Business District overlay design review for the tea cellar. And Ms. Lehman, if you would give us the background on this one.
thank you. So this request is for facade review, and it's for a new sign, a new wall sign, and awnings at 209 State Street. And it's to advertise the building's new tenant, the tea cellar. This property is located in the Central Business District, which does require P&Z and City Council review for any substantial exterior improvements. So that's why we have this in front of us today. So here you see an image of the current facade as well as what is being proposed. Again, proposing a new wall sign and awnings on the building itself. So when considering facade changes in the Central Business District, there are a number of criteria that staff looks at via the code to see if it would be compatible with the district. So here I've outlined the different review criteria that the code calls on, and the three that are in red are the ones that apply to this specific project. So I'll just quickly give you a summary of each of those, again with more detail in the staff reports. So looking at the proposed work with materials, they're proposing to use an outdoor fabric for the awnings, which is consistent and similar to the other awnings within the district, and that actually the existing metal wood frame on the front of the building for the awning will be used. So really it's just a matter of taking the material and wrapping it around what's existing there now. So from staff's perspective, the materials used are consistent, so it meets that criteria. The color of the building itself will remain the same, and the blue fabric will act as an accent to the building. Staff feels that this meets the color criteria of the code. And lastly, looking at signage, the proposed sign will be approximately 24 square feet, and will be made out of a gouge cold-rolled steel, which will use or have a steel clear coat over it to help prevent rusting. So the size and placement of the proposed wall sign does meet city code requirements. It does meet our standards for that. So in essence, planning staff recommends the approval of the proposed changes to 209 State Street.
Thank you. Is there anyone present, applicant or otherwise, who'd like to speak to this item? Commission?
Looks pretty straightforward. I have no questions. I would move to approve.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to approve. We'll do our roll call voting again, please.
Okay. Atkins?
Aye.
Arnson?
Aye.
Giarrusso?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Leeper?
Aye.
Oberly?
Aye.
Saul?
Aye.
Wingert?
Aye.
Thank you. That item is approved, and we'll move on to City Council. Our second agenda item is a planned commercial district PC2 site plan review for 936 Viking for the outbuilding number 1. And Mr. Graham, if you would introduce this item, please.
Sure, thank you. What's before the commission tonight is a PC2 district site plan review. This is for outbuilding number 1 on the property at 936 Viking Road. So this is on Viking Road, just to the east of the CFU Solar Garden and Prairie Lakes Park. This property probably looks familiar because it was rezoned by the commission back in 2016 to allow for this development. And then several site plans have come before the commission in the recent years. One for the main building on the property, which is a gymnasium building, which was approved by the commission in 2016, and then outbuilding number 3, which was approved in 2017. And so again, as each building is coming forward, we're running those through site plan review for each of the individual buildings to make sure it still meets the design of the other buildings and making sure it's meeting all of its certain elements. So this is the overall site plan again. So the building that they're proposing is on the bottom left of this image, but it's the northwest corner of the property. It's an 8,088 square foot building. Again, the main gymnasium building is under construction right now, and then outbuilding number 1 is on the very top left of this picture. That's where Athletico is located. That building was open, I think, in June of this past year. So they're moving on to the next phase, which is the next building. And you can see on this plan, they are showing 2 additional future buildings for a total of 5 on the property. Again, the main access is coming off of Viking Road, which will then serve all of those buildings from that one main access point. Again, this is just a close-up of the building itself. Again, 8,000 square foot. It meets all of the setback requirements of the PC2 district. One of the elements on this plan is that they'll be putting in a sidewalk along Viking Road, which was reviewed during the initial site plan. And one of the things that we wanted to see was a sidewalk connection from this building to the sidewalk on Viking Road. So they are showing that as well. And they also showed that for the outbuilding number 3, where Athletico is. So they'll be connecting a sidewalk from that building to Viking Road as well. So there can be some interconnectivity with the site. What this is a staging plan for how they're constructing the parking lot. So what they did is the areas in green, it's a little hard to tell, but the areas in green is what's paved right now. What is in the red color is what they're going to pave. They're going to do that paving during the construction or prior to the construction of the building that's before the commission today. The area in purple, which is right in front of the building, will be done during the construction of this building. And then there's a little area there in teal, which is kind of in front of the building just to the south of this, which they're going to complete at a later time, most likely when they come in and complete the building to the south there. So they will have a significant portion of the parking lot complete, which will then serve this building and then the other buildings that will be on the site, including the gymnasium when that's completed. Again, so looking at building design, this building design is very similar to the existing building, the athletical building that's done now, and the gymnasium building. They have a similar look with the corrugated metal siding, the two tones of silver and charcoal, the wood shiplap siding, and then some gray stonework along with the windows and doors. Again, looks fairly similar to what was completed on outbuilding number 3, and then what's occurring with the gymnasium building that's under construction. Again, these are just side elevations. Again, looks very similar to what was approved previously for the other outbuilding. The landscaping plan, again, we wanted to see, they did submit an overall landscaping plan back when the original rezoning came through and the main site plan, but this is just more of a detailed plan for just this site itself. They're showing trees along Viking Road, shrubs along the back of the building, and then some shrubs and trees within the parking lot. So it does meet all of our landscaping requirements, such as meeting street trees, trees within the parking area, and trees around the building. So the landscaping plan appears adequate for this site. There was just several minor technical review comments. One, back when this building, the athletical building, was approved for its temporary occupancy permit back in June, one of the things we asked them to do was to provide lighting. At the time, there was no lighting on the site, and at that time it was June, so the building was closed by 7 p.m., so there was not an issue there. But now that we're into the fall and into the winter season when it's getting darker, we did want to see lights put in. They did have some temporary lighting for a week or two, but did get permanent lighting up, so they do have lighting on site now. So that did address one of our concerns. One of the other concerns from our engineering department was regarding the stormwater. There were some stormwater plan issues that were corrected to the satisfaction of our engineering department, so they feel comfortable with this moving forward as well. And then also, when this site was first developed, they needed to stub a sewer line on the Prairie Lakes Park site to get to this site. And one of the things the engineering department was doing was wanted to get an easement. That's a private sanitary line that is on city property. And so we wanted to see an easement. Wanted to see the developer provide an easement for that, of which they've done that. The engineering department has reviewed that easement, and I think that'll be going to city council next week. So all the minor comments that we've had have been addressed by the developer, and so staff would recommend approval of this site plan for this outbuilding, again, knowing the future buildings would come back again for further site plan review.
Thank you, and thank you for the updates on the progressive pieces there. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? Bring it back to commission for discussion.
I think it's pretty consistent with the last project.
Yeah.
Kind of worked through the bugs, it seems like.
Yeah, I would recommend that we move to approve. I mean, it's kind of fits the big scheme that we approved previously when the original project came to the table, so.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Go ahead and do a roll call vote to approve.
Atkins.
Aye.
Hartley.
Aye.
Giarrusso.
Aye.
Oberly.
Aye.
Leeper.
Aye.
Wingert.
Here.
Saul.
Aye.
Arnson.
Some sort of affirmative from.
Might be there.
Thank you. So that item has been approved, and we'll also move on to city council meeting. Our final new business agenda item is the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District, a site plan review for 2119 College Street. And Mr. Sturch, if you would introduce this item.
Thank you, Mrs. Oberly. This next item is the introduction for a new building, commercial and residential mixed-use building located at 2119 College Street near the northwest corner of College and West 22nd Street. So this project consists of 3 lots, which is 1 lot is along College Street and the 2 lots along 22nd Street behind the new Great Wall building there at the corner. Property is in the College Hill overlay, which we'd have to look at through Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council for site plan details and building design elements. property is located in the C3 commercial district. So this project, again, is a 5-story building located on the narrow section of that lot, which faces College Street, and then the 2 back lots behind that building there along 22nd. It will be a place for surface parking for 47 stalls. Basically, the breakdown for that is the main floor is a commercial use with some access to the upper floors, front door and back door. There's a lobby there for the residential units above from floors 2 through 5. And in those floors, we're looking at 23 studio units, 4 2-bedroom units. There are no 3-bedroom units, and then 4 4-bedroom units. So a total of 31 units and 47 bedrooms and along with 47 parking stalls there along there. So when we look at the use of this property, again, this is in the C3 commercial district in the College Hill area, and within the overlay, which is section 29160, subsection G kind of calls out the details for those commercial districts, and basically it says we want to maintain the commercial use. There are residential uses in that area, mostly upper floor residential apartments. And so that mixed-use building is certainly welcome in the commercial district. So with that in mind, the code does say that residential uses may be contained in those commercial buildings as a secondary and accessory use. So that's what section 160G states, is basically those are allowed in the districts, and they are upper floor development for residential uses. And then moving along with that in a couple paragraphs below in 160G2, basically says those residential uses do not have to park on those sites. So that's something that we've been discussing here the last few months, over the summer, and looking at possibly clarifying that. So as this project moves forward, staff kind of maintains that this is an acceptable proposal that we want to bring towards the commission, and again, maybe clarifying some of that here in the future for some possible zoning code amendments. But again, as the current ordinance states, this is allowed use. And again, moving along with the parking as those upper floor residential uses are permitted. Again, no parking is required, but this site does provide 47 parking stalls for those bedrooms, for each of those bedrooms in this new proposal. So just kind of going through some of the building designs, as you can kind of remember, it's pretty much the same layout as what was presented before. This shows kind of the southeast perspective down by the intersection of 22nd and College. And then the other picture is the east facade there along College Street. Just moving along the northeast perspective there from across Quickstar, I'd say, and then the southwest perspective, which is as you're off 22nd Street and like in the parking lot area. So it'd be behind the building and behind the Great Wall building. So basically, the building consists of metal panels, kind of a charcoal dark gray metal panel with vertical elements and horizontal elements in a lighter gray, and then bricks. So basically, we've got metal, brick, and glass, and those are the breakdowns on each facade as pretty much 1/3 of brick and 1/4 brick and glass, and the remaining is metal panels. It's kind of consistent through all sides of that. Just kind of moving back, as you can kind of see these elevations, the areas that project out from the building, those are the different types of metal panels. So you got the charcoal darker metal panels kind of on the front of the building, on the front corner, and then the window bays that kind of extend out are the lighter metal panels. All the recessed areas are covered in brick. So then moving along, kind of did a height analysis of this. The property, the building is roughly over 61 feet, and so it kind of, we've seen this before in past examples, that it does kind of, it is a larger building in this area, but it just kind of corresponds with other buildings along 23rd Street and in the campus. So you can kind of see the comparisons there. The large one is, of course, Dancer Hall there off of Myrner. And then this kind of just gives you the elevation difference from 23rd up on the hill and then down the street to 22nd Street. So you can kind of see Urban Flats was reviewed a few years ago, kind of in similar height to the proposed building, but there's an elevation change from 23rd down to 22nd. So just as a summary, again, the building is 5 stories. It's 61.5 feet tall. Most of the buildings are in the area are 1 to 2 stories, but again, there's other similar structures in the immediate area that has the similar heights. As this is a commercial use, the base or the footprint of the building, there are no setbacks in this district, but they do have a 5-foot setback along College Street. There is a utility easement there, so we had to move that front of that building back. There's 5 feet along the south and 6 foot along the north side of the building. So I want to move into trash, other details. The trash enclosure plan here is just a standard trash area. It's located at the northwest corner of the parking lot. They identified that as an enclosed area for same materials kind of for the building there. So it's going to be a brick wall and metal panels for the doorways. Lighting, the parking area lights, those are just your standard LED lights, and basically those lights will be provided there for small foot candles that won't spread to other adjoining neighbors. So there'll be downcast lights that will provide that lighting there. And then the external wall lights will be mounted to the side of the building just to kind of give a little, provide that design element and really pull those elements out of the building for those when that light casts upon the side of the wall. Landscaping plan, just a couple details on this. They show a nice plan that meets all the requirements. The parking lot setbacks got to be 5 feet from the property line. On each property line, they show 7, so that provides some room for a mixture of trees, shrubs, perennials, grasses all the way around the parking lot. There's an internal island, so you kind of circulate off of 22nd and use one driveway there. Along the front of the building, there's an existing driveway just north of the Great Wall building that will be removed and replaced with the same brick patterns in the existing sidewalk area. And they will add a tree grate. So right now there's 2 tree grates in front of that existing building. They'll add that 3rd grate there on the south side that basically will just mirror the 3 trees on the other side of the street. So that's a nice improvement there with removal of the driveway also. And along the tree line, the line of the trees, there'll be some added bike racks in front. They'll have some bike racks behind the building. Again, the dumpster area is located at the northwest corner of the parking lot, and then there's going to be some underground detention cell there on the north side, so all the water will grade to the north and then piped along the north side of the building out to the storm sewer on College Street. So that's how the detention basin and detention runoff, storm sewer runouts works on the site. So with that, we just want to introduce this to the Planning and Zoning Commission and gather any comments from the commission and the public and continue this discussion.
Invite the applicant or anyone else who would like to speak to the item to address the commission. Commission, questions for staff, questions, discussion?
I'd like to add that I did put a letter from that was submitted yesterday, so I wanted to give you a chance to take a look at that before take that home with you and consider that here too. So that was the attorney that was at last time we brought this up.
Thank you for noting that. This particular location and proposals for this area have received a lot of attention from College Hill Partnership, other businesses within the area. Were they notified of this? Has there been any input from them?
We sent notice out last week, typically a week before the meeting, and that was the only correspondence we received for this. I took some calls about it, just general questions about does this include the parking lot that was under rezoning a couple months ago, and of course that's off the table now. So it's just basically the building and the 2 lots behind. So those are just general questions that some people have called in for. So
Obviously, still a contentious issue for some people, and I guess I would feel more comfortable at the next meeting understanding the general direction we're moving. with the secondary use clarifications before approving it. I feel like we need to know that, at least where we're moving toward, I think.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that it was, it's been hard to keep those things separate because we have these applications coming forward and we're trying to keep them on separate meetings with code amendments. And, the intention was after your last meeting, when we heard about this and the confusion about the ordinance, that we did agree that there could be some clarifications that would make it easier to review these cases. But nevertheless, we have an application in front of us, and staff continues to believe that it meets the ordinance requirements. We do intend to bring back some clarifications, and we're hoping that we will get those to you at your next meeting. And so you can consider those at the same time, but we want to make sure that and those ordinance amendments would then be beneficial to not just this application potentially, but to other applicants in the entire area. So it's not intended to be associated necessarily with this, but bringing it back to you as per the concerns that were expressed the last time we had a proposal before the commission.
I guess I'd like to personally understand that this proposal meets the intention of where we're moving toward. That's my personal feeling.
I second what Brad says. I like this proposal, and I like the fact that it has parking for the bedrooms, but we really don't have a black and white set of rules moving forward for this building or future buildings that would, I understand that there'll be some gray or moving back and forth, but something a little more standardized for us to work from. And I understand C3 district, we want to promote density, but as you go up, there needs to be some type of equation how to accommodate that amount of parking requirement.
I like the project. It's great.
So may I ask again, you are stating that maybe at the next meeting, this is just to say, hey, let's move forward and discuss it further, right? This is not an approval of the plan. This is to move it forward for further discussion.
That's what we're asking for tonight, knowing
Okay.
this was an issue that was much discussed last time. We didn't feel like it was it's certainly the commission's choice whether to move it forward or not, but
Right.
Our feeling was that it probably would take a little more discussion.
Okay.
And that's totally up to the commission to decide that.
And then, from what I understand, what you just said is that you hope to bring forward some idea of what we're going to be looking at for code amendments on parking requirements in C3 next meeting as well?
For the College Hill overlay is what our intention was, to clarify the language in the overlay. I know there's different standards, slightly different language in the downtown overlay. So that's the confusion, is there's also a parking study that's being done in downtown right now. So some clarification of the parking requirements may be something different in downtown than in College Hill. But we're specifically trying to clarify the language that was so confusing about this idea about a mixed-use building having a principal and a secondary use, and really coming to an understanding about what a mixed-use building really is, and really then focusing in on what the parking requirements should be for the principal uses in a mixed-use building.
Okay.
So getting away from this idea of a principal and secondary type use, that these are all principal uses in a mixed-use building.
All right.
I think there needs to be some caution here, though, that the commission understandably is maybe growing impatient on this issue, but maybe it's not exactly correct to be tying this particular application to what changes we want to see as well. So I just want to caution, I think that those need to be separate conversations. As staff has presented this project to us as a commission to review, with the statement that it meets their understanding, their interpretation of code.
Don't we have to approve that, going along with what she was saying, don't we actually have to approve what you guys come up with as far as how that new code will read anyway? So if some of us up here don't agree with what your wording is for that new C3 code and parking requirements, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get passed anyway. So my thought would be you vote for what you think that it should be as it is today, and then
Yeah, the votes need to be separate. I mean, you have an application before you, and it's been, so we need to act on that application per what the code is right now. And we're making a presentation that we believe that it meets the requirements. In addition, we believe it also meets some of the concerns that were expressed beyond what I mean, for any project in the city that has parking requirements, it's always the option for the developer to provide more parking than's required. In this case, the developer is proposing to provide 47 parking spaces for 47 bedrooms, recognizing that there has been a concern about, not providing any parking for example, for a residential building. So that's the application that's before you, and recognizing that you may want to have some more additional time to think about this, and if you have anything further that you would like us to address with regard to the whole site plan, any questions that you have that we can bring back to you and try to address next time on this application. Separate from that, we recognize that the language is a little ambiguous, and there's been a lot of discussion about cleaning that up and making it more clear and easier for the commission to make a clear case. It's been our intention to bring something to the commission to clear up that language. We're hoping to have a code amendment proposed for you for the next meeting, but once again, it would be a separate vote on a separate item that you may want to take a couple meetings to decide on as well. Does that kind of answer?
One thing that might be kind of important here, obviously this has been scaled somewhat. I think it'd be important, there's a lot of numbers that I guess I remember from the previous one that I'm not sure I can recall all of them at this point. There was a lot of discussion about even not having 100% parked for each room, if I remember right. Is that correct? Weren't we in a different situation with how many parking spaces in relationship to bedrooms there were than we are this time?
it was closer to a 1-to-1 per unit, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Out of bedroom.
Yeah, so we're at a
On a
one-to-one.
percentage basis, this is a higher parking ratio than what the last proposal was.
Yes, I think that's
What
got
they're
to be.
proposing to do.
Yeah, and I don't think that's really called out very specifically here, that those things have changed in proportion a little bit that makes this a little more attractive.
But if, in actuality, the 47 parking spots don't make a difference if we're to interpret the code as they're representing it. The code says he does not have to park anything, if that's the way the code is to be interpreted, right?
Right, but it's still a fact that there's more spaces available for
Right.
the rooms that are available. And
Yeah.
I think that's the key part here that should be brought forward. At least understand the scaling and how, there's going to be a lot of comparisons between this one and the last one, and I think it'd be helpful to see some of those things.
I guess a question for me is that, are you comfortable that the accessory use clause applies to buildings of 2 stories and 10 stories?
So the way not to drag out what we presented the last time, but staff continues to believe that this application is proposed, that the way the language was drafted, the way the legislative history that we researched back to how this code was changed over time, we do believe that there was an intention to exclude in a mixed-use building such as this that meets the intent of the College Hill overlay. The goal was to try to get a more urban form here and get some redevelopment occurring in the College Hill neighborhood. So we believe that it was intentional to exempt upper floor residential in a mixed-use building. We continue to believe that that is the case. Now, obviously, there's been some disagreement about that. You may not agree with that. That's perfectly fine for you to make that case. But staff is staying consistent with our interpretation of the ordinance.
And that staff includes revisions from the city attorney and legal counsel for the city as well. That's their...
We of course, they have looked over what we wrote in our staff report and our analysis from the last time.
I agree completely, and I've made it pretty clear I'm a fan of density. We just have to ask those questions.
Right. Now, it may be that through this other process, when we're taking a look at changing some of these definitions so it's more clear, we can take a look at whether that's, something we need to look at and say, commercial use, we're going to still exempt from parking requirements, and we may want to look at establishing a parking requirement for upper floor residential. That certainly can be on the table. And, but getting away from this idea of principal and secondary type uses in the mixed-use building. So that's kind of the direction that we're going towards, so that you can have a more clear conversation about what you believe the parking requirements should be for these types of buildings.
Under the current requirements, is there a scenario where the developer builds this and decides to build a building on the parking lot because it's not required?
I mean, that's always the case if ordinances change and there's something that changes in the ordinance that would imply that they don't need this parking, or there's determined that the parking is not needed. Certainly, things can redevelop, just like, anywhere in town.
Happy to see it back.
I would move it forward to the next meeting.
And any other feedback for staff or the applicant so that we make sure we have all the information at the next commission meeting?
I would just raise the question of, it's a mixed-use building. We've spent a fair amount of time talking about what is going to be in the upper floors. Studio apartments, 2 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, but no discussion about that main level, that commercial. Is it going to be divided into multiple storefronts? Is it one big space? But a little bit more detail on the commercial use of the building.
We can get that.
Thank you.
I think given the holiday in between too, this is just an important one that's had a lot of attention. So making sure that we have input from the College Hill business folks that we've heard from before will be important. Anything else? Okay. So this item will carry forward to our next commission meeting on December 12th. That concludes our new agenda business items. Are there any commission updates for the staff, from the staff?
I just want to make sure that we got the quorum call sort of for the 26th of December. I know that a lot of holiday plans. It doesn't look to me like that we have a quorum for the 26th. So we may send out, whether we try to reschedule that one or just, cancel that meeting and move on to the next one. Typically, even if we had just barely a quorum, a lot of times applicants don't want to come to the commission with just barely a quorum, because that means that they have to get 100% of the vote. And so I think for all parties, perhaps it's best to just cancel that meeting. And we'll discuss it internally, and send out a message if we decide we need to reschedule it to another time, and whether that's even possible with your schedule. So right now, it doesn't look like we have a quorum for the 26th.
That concludes our agenda items. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of adjournment signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. We are adjourned.